The golden retriever stood motionless at the edge of the terminal floor, muscles tight beneath his glistening coat, eyes locked on the woman with the red scarf. She wasn't running, she wasn't shouting, just walking calmly through Gate B with a bundled infant pressed to her chest. But Scout refused to let her pass. His body shifted, braced against her movement, and then, for the first time in 5 years of service, he barked, not once, but twice, sharp, absolute. Every head turned, every voice fell silent. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move, you please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Snow blanketed the small town of Sun Valley, Idaho, in a thick, unwavering hush. It was late January, and the mountains around the regional airport looked like sleeping giants under soft white quilts. The air outside was brittle and clean, the kind that turned every exhale into fog and made every sound seem sharper, crisper. Inside Sun Valley Regional Airport, a compact, two-terminal building nestled against the foot of Pioneer Mountains, travelers shuffled past one another wrapped in scarves and winter gear, the sound of boot soles against tile echoing beneath high glass ceilings. Deputy Claire Monroe stood just past the security checkpoint of Terminal B, one hand resting lightly on her duty belt, the other holding the leash of the dog at her side. Claire was tall and lean, in her late 30s, with a posture that said she'd seen more than she let on. Her dark auburn hair was pulled into a low, disciplined bun beneath her Navy uniform cap. The badge on her chest gleamed, polished to regulation, and her green eyes scanned the crowd with the constant alertness of someone who had learned never to relax in public. Claire wasn't born into law enforcement. It found her. After losing her father to a highway accident caused by a drunk driver when she was 21, she changed majors, left the arts behind, and joined the academy 12 years later. She had returned to Sun Valley not to escape trauma, but to meet it on her own terms. Beside her sat Scout. Scout was a golden retriever, 6 years old, coat brushed to a silken gold, his body broad but graceful. His eyes were a deep amber, and they didn't dart. They locked. They studied. Scout had been trained not as a narcotics or bomb dog, but in emotional and behavioral detection, a specialty developed through years of work with trauma victims. Before pairing with Claire, he had been used in hospitals and recovery centers, silently sensing what words couldn't express. And until today, he had never once barked at a civilian, but now without warning, Scout's stance stiffened, his head jerked up. He emitted a deep-chested, forceful bark that echoed across the terminal, freezing movement around them like a switch had flipped. Claire's hand reflexively dropped toward his back. "Scout," she said softly. "What is it?" The dog lunged one pace forward, leash taut. His growl rumbled low and constant. All eyes turned toward the direction of his attention. A woman was approaching from the gate lobby, walking calmly and alone. She wore a long, dark wool coat, and her jet-black hair was swept into a tight bun. She appeared in her early 30s, tall, slender, with a carefully composed expression. In her arms, wrapped in a red blanket, she carried what appeared to be a sleeping infant. She wasn't running, wasn't yelling. Her pace was measured, unhurried, but Scout blocked her path completely, barking again louder this time. People started murmuring, glancing between the woman and the agitated golden retriever. A security guard stepped forward. Phones began rising into the air. Claire raised a hand, signaling them to stay back. Then she stepped into the woman's path. "Ma'am," she said firmly, but not unkindly, "I need to speak with you for a moment." The woman stopped, blinking as though caught off guard. "My name is Harper Lowell," she said. Her voice was level, smooth, not frightened. "Is something wrong?" Claire's eyes flicked to the bundle in her arms. "May I ask where you're traveling, Denver?" Harper replied. "American Airlines. We were just at the gate." Claire nodded. "Can I see your boarding pass and ID?" Please. Harper's posture didn't change. She gently shifted the baby in her arms, still no movement from the child. Scout let out a sharper growl. Claire's gaze narrowed. A baby, even a sleeping one, would normally stir at the sound of barking, at least flinch. But there was nothing. Not a twitch of a tiny limb, not the faintest flutter of the blanket. You said Denver, Claire asked again, watching Harper's face closely. Yes. Your baby's very still, Claire said carefully. How old is she? She just turned 1. She's tired. It's been a long day. Claire didn't reply. She made a subtle gesture to the nearby TSA agent. We'll need to conduct a quick secondary screening. Ms. Lowell, my partner's reaction suggests something's not quite right. For the first time. Harper hesitated. I don't see the need for that. You don't have to, Claire said evenly. But my dog hasn't made a mistake in 5 years. Harper's knuckles tightened around the blanket. Scout inched forward. Claire's jaw clenched. Something here didn't add up, and she trusted Scout's instincts more than any human explanation. Across town. The snow had slowed to a misty drift over a gas station on the southern edge of Sun Valley. The Sinclair sat tucked between a motel and a used tire shop, its windows fogged from the contrast of indoor warmth and freezing winds. Inside, Eli Monroe wiped down the counter with lazy precision. He was Claire's younger brother, 32, ex-Marine turned night clerk. Eli had a boyish look despite the faint scar across his cheek. His golden hair always a little too long, and his jeans always a little too worn. He'd once patched up soldiers under gunfire in Afghanistan. Now. He brewed over-sugared coffee for snowmobilers. He liked the quiet, the routine, the way no one asked why he never went out anymore. He had just turned to stock a row of energy drinks when a man rushed past the counter in a heavy gray coat, moving toward the restroom with hurried, disjointed steps. As he passed, a manila folder slipped from his tote bag and landed on the floor unnoticed. Eli blinked. The man had already vanished into the hallway. Curious, Eli knelt and picked up the folder. It wasn't sealed, and it wasn't empty. Inside were printed photographs, children, women, documents, and stamped across the top of every page Clear Bend Renewal Center, Orem, Utah. Eli's brow furrowed. He paused on one of the images. A familiar golden retriever sat beside a hospital bed, the same gentle eyes, the same posture. Scout. What the hell? He whispered, fingers tightening on the folder. Scout's growl rumbled like a low engine, vibrating through the leash as Deputy Claire Monroe kept her eyes fixed on Harper Lowell. The woman remained composed, arms wrapped around the baby nestled in the red blanket, her expression still and unflinching. There was no fear in her voice, only polite confusion, as though this moment were an inconvenience, not a confrontation. I already told you, Deputy, Harper said evenly, her voice soft yet crisp. I'm flying to Denver, Gate 3, American Airlines. Claire's brow furrowed slightly. She had radioed dispatch moments earlier. All flights to Denver had been canceled due to severe icing in the Rockies, an update posted on the terminal boards just 30 minutes ago. That's strange, Claire said, voice calm but pointed. Because American Airlines grounded all Denver departures 2 hours ago. Weather. Harper blinked, her lips parted. Just for a second. I meant United. I must have mixed it up. It's been a long morning. Scout gave a sudden sharp bark, loud enough to turn heads, then another. Faster, Claire took one step forward. Ma'am, what's the child's name? He's my son. His name is Charlie, Harper said quickly. The baby didn't stir. Claire's jaw tensed. She could see the edges of a pale cheek beneath the blanket, no movement, no shift of breath. That's when the voice came from the terminal entrance, breathless, sharp, half caught between hope and panic. Toby. It came from an elderly woman with soft gray curls pulled under a wool cloche hat, her cheeks wine-flushed, her gait uneven but determined. She moved with the fragility of someone used to pain but fueled now by something deeper recognition. Her name was Maggie Rowe, 71. Retired elementary school teacher, she had lost her daughter to cancer last year. Since then, her grandson Toby had been her entire world. When Maggie's eyes found the bundle in Harper's arms, she stopped dead. The folder in her hands fell, laminated pages scattering. That's him, she whispered, voice cracking. That's Toby. My God. Toby Harper's mask shattered. No. She snapped. I don't know who that woman is. This is my son. You're scaring him. Claire held up a palm toward Maggie, gently motioning her to stay back. "Ma'am," Claire said to Harper, "you need to put the child down so we can check his condition." "I won't," Harper said sharply, stepping back, "and Scout," as if reading the shift in her stance. Surged forward not to attack, but to block. He planted himself in Harper's path, tail low, body rigid, eyes locked on her arms. The woman froze. Claire didn't reach for her weapon. She didn't need to. Scout's body said everything. "Harper, if that's your name, you're not going anywhere." The baby didn't move, didn't wake. Claire stepped forward slowly, lowering her voice to a whisper. "If he's okay, then you've got nothing to worry about." "I'm not giving him up," Harper said again, quieter now, desperation finally cracking her control. Behind her, Maggie let out a broken sob. Claire lifted her radio. "Dispatch, I need EMS to Terminal B. Possible pediatric medical code, yellow, and initiate a missing child match under the name Toby Rowe." Scout didn't break eye contact with Harper. He didn't bark again, but Claire saw his stance protective, alert, and completely still. She turned to the TSA officer. "We're moving her to a secure room, gently, across town." Eli Monroe sat hunched in front of an old laptop, the flicker of its screen the only light in the narrow room above the gas station. Snow tapped lightly against the window behind him, muffled and rhythmic. He hadn't said anything to Claire, not yet, but the folder he'd found haunted him. Clear Bend Renewal Center, Orem, Utah. He had started digging. At first, the facility looked like just another high-end recovery center sleek website, calming colors, glowing testimonials. But when he checked Reddit, something else surfaced, a thread buried deep in a trauma survivor forum. "Did Clear Bend convince you to believe something that wasn't real?" The comments were sparse, mostly deleted, but one username had posted a long paragraph, reclaiming Janine. She claimed that after losing her newborn son, she was referred to Clear Bend for integrated grief therapy. The staff introduced her to a toddler named Caleb and told her gently, repeatedly, that he was a soul echo. They fed her ideas, showed her drawings, told her the boy had her son's birthmark by the time she left. She believed it. She had tried to retrieve Caleb from a daycare. The child wasn't hers. Eli's breath caught in his throat. Scout had been in one of the photos in that folder. And if Clear Bend had used him during sessions, if they had used images of therapy dogs to create artificial familiarity, it meant Scout was unknowingly part of their manipulation tactics. He clicked on Janine's profile. Her bio was sparse, but it listed a contact email. He typed a message. "Hi, Janine. You don't know me. My name is Eli Monroe. I think I found something that connects you. A therapy center, and a case involving my sister's K9 dog. I'm not asking for details, but I think someone's trying to do it again." He hit send. He wasn't sure what kind of reply he'd get, if any, but something in his gut told him this wasn't isolated, and something about Harper's eyes. They looked like someone who'd been promised something beautiful and handed a lie. Back at the airport, Claire stood behind the one-way glass of the observation room, watching as paramedics gently lifted the infant from Harper's arms. She didn't fight anymore. She just sat there, eyes wide and wet, breathing too fast, fingers still gripping a corner of the red blanket even after the child had been placed in a carrier. Scout paced once across the floor, then sat beneath the chair where Claire stood, his tail unmoving, ears stiff. The baby Toby was pale but breathing, no visible marks, but still too still. Sedated the medic guessed. "We'll know soon." Maggie waited outside the glass, face pressed to the window, tears sliding down the creases of her face. Claire whispered down to Scout, "You knew." The dog gave no sound, only leaned slightly into her leg, as if anchoring her. The security interview room at Sun Valley Regional Airport was no more than a repurposed utility office peeling off-white walls, a battered metal table, and a two-way mirror that distorted reflections in the dim fluorescent light. Claire Monroe stood with her arms folded, her uniform cap resting on the desk, watching the woman across from her closely. Harper Lowell, or rather, Rachel Dwyer. She had finally admitted her real name after Claire presented the inconsistencies in her statements. The ID had been fake, but crafted well-state seal, barcode, expiration date all polished with unsettling precision. Yet nothing explained the child's limpness until the EMTs confirmed it. Toby had been sedated. Rachel sat hunched forward in the plastic chair, hands clasped tightly between her knees. Her black hair had loosened from its pristine bun, strands clinging to the sweat on her temples. The calm mask she wore earlier had cracked, replaced by confusion, grief, and something deeper faith in something that wasn't real. "He's mine," she whispered again, her voice fraying at the edges. They said he was Charlie, that his eyes, his curls, even his scar, everything matched. Claire kept her voice even. "Who told you that?" Rachel blinked, as though the name didn't belong to her anymore. "Dr. Hal Merrick. He said sometimes. Souls circle back. That when grief's strong enough. It creates a pull, like a tide, that Charlie could come back." Claire didn't answer immediately, her stomach twisted. "And Clearben showed you photos?" Rachel nodded, slowly. "Videos, pictures. They said this boy was born the day Charlie died. Same eyes, same birthmark. They told me not to question what I felt." She swallowed hard. "He looked like my son." "And the medication?" Claire asked. "What did you give him?" Rachel's lips trembled. "Something to help him sleep. Just children's Benadryl. I didn't want him to cry. I didn't want him scared when we left." Scout, who had been lying near the door, stood up quietly and padded over to Claire, sitting close beside her, his head tilted, his gaze fixed not on Rachel, but on the now empty child's seat near the wall. Claire crouched and rubbed his shoulder gently. "He reacted to you before anyone else did." She murmured. Rachel looked at the dog. "He was in the pictures," she said. Claire's eyes sharpened. "What pictures?" "At Clearbend. There were dogs in the waiting room, therapy photos. They said." That one, she nodded toward Scout. "He was in a hallway photo, next to a hospital bed. That's why I trusted him when he came near Toby." Claire felt the chill run through her. That same afternoon, Eli Monroe parked his truck in the gravel lot outside a rustic cafe 30 miles south of town. The sign out front read Pinecone Hollow Bakery, and inside it smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. The windows were fogged from the warmth within, but one corner booth was visible a woman with her back to the door, hands wrapped around a chipped white mug. Janine Holloway. She stood when Eli approached, offering a reserved smile, mid-40s, short and slightly stooped, with tired eyes behind oversized glasses. Her blonde hair was streaked with gray, clipped back simply, and she wore a wool cardigan that looked hand-knitted. There was kindness in her voice, but every movement she made seemed measured, as if she was afraid to speak too quickly and betray herself. "I didn't expect a face-to-face," she said softly, gesturing for Eli to sit. "Most people who message that account just want to argue." Eli shook his head. "I just want to understand what they did to you." Janine looked down. Her fingers tightened on her cup. "I lost my son 4 years ago." She said, "Stillborn. I wasn't handling it well. My therapist said Clearbend was a place for women like me. They talked about healing through reframing." "What does that mean?" Eli asked. "They tell you you're not crazy for seeing signs. They show you children who resemble your lost child, same birth dates, same features. Then they guide you, in sessions, into accepting that your grief may be answered in another form." Eli leaned forward. "You believed it." Janine gave a pained smile. "When you haven't slept in 6 months, and someone hands you a reason to get up in the morning? Yes, I believed it." She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It was old and creased. In it, a toddler smiled up at a therapy dog golden retriever. Deep amber eyes. Scout. "I was supposed to meet that child the next week," Janine whispered, "but I left before it happened. Something felt wrong. They told me if I backed out, I'd never heal, that my chance would be lost." Eli's hands closed around the edge of the table. Claire's dog, Scout. He reacted violently to a woman who tried to take a child from an airport. "We think she was one of you, one of the patients, and that the boy, Toby, he isn't hers." Janine's eyes welled. It's not just therapy, it's programming. She hesitated, then added, they use sound, scents, images. They didn't just suggest, they rewired. Eli's phone buzzed, a message from Claire Child Stable, woman identified as Rachel Dwyer. She mentioned a Dr. Hal Merrick. Janine exhaled sharply. He's the architect. I only met him once, but his sessions were the ones recorded. He's the one who said we had to earn our healing. She looked up. If Rachel got as far as taking a child, then he's gone further than I thought. Eli stood slowly. Would you be willing to testify? I'd be terrified, she said honestly. Scout never looked away from her. Eli said. He remembered. Maybe you will too. Janine gave a slow nod. I'll try. Back in the sheriff's satellite office in Sun Valley, Claire sat at her desk reviewing a series of grainy intake forms faxed from Utah. Rachel's signature was on every one. Clearben's letterhead. The term reparative narrative therapy appeared again and again. Scout sat under her desk, head on her boot. His breathing was steady now, but every time Claire moved toward the evidence pile, his ears twitched. Rachel was still being held in medical evaluation. Toby had begun to stir, blinking and shifting in his sleep. Maggie hadn't left his side. Claire looked down at the dog. You're not just a tracker, she murmured. You remember faces, pain, patterns. She pulled a folder marked Clearben Pending Leads. Inside were photographs taken from the facility's promotional materials. A hallway, a playroom, a mural of sunflowers and clouds, and in the far left corner, Scout, seated beside a crib, next to a woman sobbing on the floor, Claire whispered. They used you. They used everything. Snow had melted into slush as the convoy rolled up the narrow, pine-lined road outside of Orem, Utah. The trees stood tall and patient in the misty morning, their branches still dusted with the last breath of winter. The property at the end of the lane was quiet, too quiet for a place that claimed to help people reclaim their lives. A 2-story building stood there, wood-paneled and glass-fronted like a luxury retreat center, wrapped in cold silence and the faint scent of cedar and disinfectant. Claire Monroe stepped out of the SUV first, her boots crunching over wet gravel. Her uniform jacket was zipped high to her neck, and Scout stepped out beside her, sniffing the air as if it whispered things humans couldn't hear. Eli closed the passenger door of his truck and caught up with her, the wind tugging lightly at the canvas of his green field coat. Claire's expression was unreadable, but her eyes didn't stop scanning the windows. The awning, the shadow behind the wooden welcome sign. Sheriff Thomas Hartley, a lean, silver-haired man in his late 50s with a calm, unhurried voice, stood waiting by the main entrance. No one's been in or out since the warrant hit the system, he said, tapping a clipboard against his leg. Properties registered to a shell non-profit. Everything leads back to a Dr. Hal Merrick. We're expecting hidden rooms. Off-book records, Claire said. This place staged therapy with abducted children. And Scout, he's seen it before. Hartley looked down at the golden retriever. Then, I suppose he leads inside. The building was warm and staged with deliberate comfort, faux stone fireplace, plush earth-tone chairs, and neutral paintings of bridges and fields. It reeked of performative healing. The receptionist's desk was vacant, a ceramic bowl still half filled with lemon candies. Claire signaled with her hand. Clear rooms 1 and 2. Let's move. Scout's nose dropped to the floor. His gait changed slow. Searching. He stopped once in front of a door labeled Reintegration Suite, gave a single huff, then moved on, through the hallway and past a playroom that looked too sterile to have ever hosted laughter. Scout finally paused near a frosted glass door marked Administrative Archives. Claire unlocked it with the master key Hartley provided. The office inside was tastefully modern dark wood desk, neat bookcases, sleek lighting, but Scout ignored the furnishings. He patted behind the desk, nose near a bookshelf, and gave a short bark. Claire knelt and examined the molding. There's a seam here. Eli crouched beside her and found a faint catch beneath the bottom shelf. He pressed. A soft mechanical click answered. The entire bookshelf shifted an inch outward. Claire stood, back up, with a grunt. She pulled the hidden door wide. Behind it was a narrow stairwell leading downward. Lights flickered on automatically as they descended. The basement smelled of antiseptic and humidity. The space opened into a room no bigger than a small garage, but what it held was not storage. Cribs, stacked along the wall, unused, stuffed animals, still wrapped in plastic. Shelves with children's books, all mint condition. Framed photographs lined one wall, images of babies, toddlers, mothers with their arms outstretched in joy or despair. Every detail looked designed, not lived. In the corner sat a set of medical cabinets and recording equipment. Claire opened one and found a row of small bottles, some labeled with mild sedatives, others with names she didn't recognize. "This isn't therapy," she said. "It's stagecraft." Eli walked toward a heavy locked filing cabinet tucked behind the crib display. Scout was already seated beside it, staring at the bottom drawer. Hartley joined them with the bolt cutter. The cabinet creaked open. Inside were dozens of folders, neatly bound, marked with initials. Claire rifled through until her fingers froze. Row. T. She pulled it free. A yellow sticker on the corner read, "Compatible. Phase 2. The contents were chilling. A match report between Rachel Dwyer's deceased child and Toby Rowe. Facial overlays, blood type comparisons, behavioral markers, and a final page. Printed with surgical detachment. Subject passed proximity test. Initiate maternal bonding. Claire's knuckles went white. Phase 2. Eli read aloud, voice tight. What was Phase 3? Claire turned to Hartley. "We need all digital storage confiscated now." They found it in a cabinet marked clinical logs. Dozens of flash drives and labeled DVDs, video records of patient interviews, guided grief breakthroughs, and staged moments of so-called recognition. Scout paced in small circles, as if overwhelmed by the weight of what had happened here. In one video, Rachel appeared, sitting across from Dr. Merrick. Her voice trembled as she recounted a dream where she saw Charlie reborn with curls and dimples and a scar behind his left ear. Dr. Merrick leaned forward and whispered, "We believe that dream was real." "The soul knows its journey," Eli muttered. "He wasn't treating them. He was conditioning them." Claire's voice was low, weaponizing grief. Later, standing in the wet afternoon light outside the center, Eli leaned against the side of his truck, arms folded. He watched Scout move between officers and evidence techs, his golden coat soaked at the edges, tail still and eyes focused on every open door. "If Scout hadn't barked at her," Eli said, "we would have never known." Claire didn't answer immediately. She stared back at the building's stained glass windows. "It's not just instinct," she said. "He doesn't just read body language, he reads pain deep, buried things. He feels it when the rest of us choose not to look." Eli nodded slowly, so he saw what Rachel couldn't even see in herself. Claire ran a hand down Scout's back. "He saw what we ignored." The pediatric recovery wing at Boise Regional Hospital was quiet at sunrise. Pale gold light filtered through tall windows, stretching long shadows across the linoleum floors. Monitors beeped softly, and the faint scent of antiseptic lingered in the halls like a memory that refused to leave. In room 213, a nurse named Karina Ramos, petite with tired but kind eyes, was checking vitals on a child whose name had stirred headlines and hearts in equal measure. Toby Rowe, 2 years old, brown curls, soft cheeks, and a heartbeat that had grown stronger over the last 48 hours. His breathing was normal now. Sedation flushed from his system, and his fingers twitched as he began to stir with waking dreams. Next to his bed sat Maggie Rowe, her shoulders curved inward, as though bracing for every shallow breath Toby took. The lines on her face told stories of sleepless nights and long winters, both literal and emotional. She wore a wool cardigan too big for her frame, and in her lap, she clutched a small stuffed fox with one torn ear, patched and loved. When the door opened with a soft creak, Maggie looked up. Scout entered first. He walked slowly, deliberately, his golden coat glistening from the morning dew. There was no bark, no tail wag, just presence unshaken, unhurried. His eyes locked on Toby, and then he moved to the side of the bed and sat down. Toby stirred, his eyelids fluttered, and then his gaze found Scout. At first, just a blink, then another, then a breath of real, full, chest-filling breath. "Scow," Toby whispered, the word broken and gentle, but unmistakable. Maggie gasped. A soft sob caught in her throat as she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to Toby's tiny shoulder. Scout didn't move. He stayed still, a guardian carved of patience, and lowered his head gently into the boy's hand. Claire stood quietly in the doorway, watching. Her uniform jacket was unzipped, revealing a plain green shirt beneath. Her hair was loose for the first time in weeks, tumbling softly over her shoulders. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. 3 days later, Rachel Dwyer was escorted by federal marshals to a secure psychiatric facility in Nevada. She had stopped resisting. No more claims of reincarnation, no more whispered names of Charlie. Only silence, and the occasional muttered apology she never quite finished saying. The press surrounded the hospital steps that morning, cameras flashing, but Claire gave no statements. Instead, she stood in the background, arms crossed, Scout seated loyally at her side. When one reporter asked if the dog had solved the case, she answered plainly, he wasn't trying to solve anything. He was trying to protect someone. 2 weeks later, the building that had once housed Clearbend Renewal Center was sealed with federal warning signs and hazard tape. The official statement cited unlawful psychological manipulation, misuse of therapeutic substances, and evidence of coordinated child endangerment. But to those who knew the truth, those words were only a fraction of what had been done. Eli and Claire sat on a park bench overlooking the courthouse square. Scout lay between them, tongue lolling slightly in the spring breeze. "So," Eli said, tossing a pebble onto the path. "Are we doing this or not?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "The foundation," he said. "You said you had a name." She hesitated. "Golden Watch." Eli grinned. "Cheesy, but I love it." Golden Watch became real within a month. A nonprofit initiative, part therapy, part rescue, part justice. Dogs like Scout, trained not just in obedience but in emotional reading, to work with children, trauma survivors, the forgotten and the recovering, the ones who didn't speak loudly but who still carried stories. Janine Holloway once, a patient. Now a voice volunteered as the first trauma education director. Sheriff Hartley donated the first set of collars, each engraved with a name and a phrase. Not all guardians need to speak. They took over an old vet clinic near the edge of town. Maggie baked cookies every Wednesday for the volunteers. Even the mayor showed up at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, awkwardly petting Scout and wiping a tear before cameras saw. On a bright morning in May, the sun lit up Fairbend Park like something out of a postcard. Children's laughter rang through the trees. Picnic blankets dotted the grass, and in one open clearing near the duck pond, a boy chased a golden retriever. Toby ran clumsily on his little legs, curly hair bouncing with each step. His giggle came in bursts, wild and free, in his hand, a tennis ball far too big for his grip. He hurled it with all his might, barely 3 feet, and Scout bolted after it like it had been launched from a cannon. Maggie sat nearby on a plaid blanket, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and sunglasses that didn't hide the joy in her eyes. Her hands rested gently on a binder in her lap, a draft proposal for Golden Watch's expansion. She had underlined one sentence twice. "We train dogs not to find victims, but to guard healing." Claire stood beside the bench, watching Toby and Scout with a quiet smile. Eli approached, carrying 2 iced teas. He passed one to her and sat on the bench with a content sigh. Claire spoke without turning. "You think he remembers it?" Eli glanced at Scout. "Toby or the dog?" Claire shrugged. "Both. I think they remember the important part." Eli said, "Not the pain, just the bond." They watched as Scout brought the ball back to Toby, dropped it at his feet, and nudged him with his nose. Toby squealed, scow and hugged the dog around the neck. Claire looked down, voice low. One dog held onto a boy's soul when the rest of us were too blind to see it. Scout looked up at her briefly, then turned back to Toby. He didn't need praise. He had his purpose. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or lightning. Sometimes, they arrive quietly on 4 paws, with eyes that see what others overlook, and a heart that knows when a soul is in danger. Scout wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian sent at the exact moment he was needed. when the world had gone silent to a child's cry. This story reminds us that God doesn't always speak in grand gestures. He often works through the silent protectors, the unexpected moments, the instincts we too often ignore. In our daily lives, we rush, we overlook, we doubt. But maybe today, we can slow down and listen to the ones who don't speak but still protect, to the ones who carry love in their actions, not their words. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. And if you believe that God still sends silent guardians into this world, type Amen in the comments to show you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and the power of love that never gives up. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that restore faith. And may God bless you and every silent guardian watching over your life.